Okay, now that the meeting started, are the committee members okay with the agenda items? Can you nod your head or
Yes.
thumbs up? Thank you. And the meeting minutes are also available. And I can share that with you as well.
Kim, I think if we take, I know I had a comment about another DEC perspective. I think if we take that comment out, I'd be ready to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. I'm trying to pull them up to show
Okay.
everyone too. Sorry, I need a better monitor because I only am doing this on my laptop, so it's a little sometimes confusing for me. So I apologize for that delay. So here's the meeting minutes draft. Sarah, you did comment on some things and I had taken those out earlier. So these are the updated draft of those meeting minutes. So I believe I took out originally the Pesticide Advisory Board is now the Agricultural Innovation Board, and stakeholders is now interested parties. But otherwise, everything is the same, and Sarah still has a note for me to check in with Anna Gallagher. So does the committee members accept the meeting minutes as they are noted?
Yes.
So Sarah already made a motion. I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. All righty. Great.
And do we need to say all in favor?
Oh, yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? The meeting minutes stand as noted. Thank you for reminding me. Okay, so the next agenda item is to look at the statutes. Can everybody see the statutes on my screen? Okay, thanks,
Yes.
Sarah. Okay, so we were going to dive into the statutes a little bit today. I did review these at the last meeting, but we're going to just kind of dive in and open the discussions up for any questions or comments. So just to overall look at Chapter 50, the Aquatic Nuisance Control, there's many different components of that. So we have the findings, and that's the overall understanding that the Agency of Natural Resources oversees the general welfare to protect public health and the environment. And it is a policy of the state to prevent infestation and proliferation of invasive species in the state that result in negative environmental impacts, including habitat loss and reduction in native biodiversity, along with adverse social and economic impacts, and the impacts to the public health and safety. The Agency of Agriculture, Department of Forest and Parks establishes an informal working group, which is now actually a formal working group, that is called the Vermont Invasive Plant Advisory Committee, to list invasive species. And so that's a little bit different from the list and the definition that we have under the Aquatic Nuisance Control definition. I'll get into that in a second. And we also have the ability to initiate quickly a response to contain and control new aquatic invasive species introductions before it can spread, to reduce management costs and protect the integrity of Vermont's ecosystems. and that new infestations must be detected early and acted upon swiftly to maintain the economic, social, and ecological impacts, as well to increase the probability of a successful eradication effort. So the aquatic nuisance control definitions are also listed here. So I'm not going to go through all of those. I just
So,
mentioned.
Kim, can we just pause between sections and ask?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I realize these are the findings, but I'm curious about the relationship around. I think I'm trying to follow along, but like the determination of what's an invasive species and how the three departments work together to make those determinations.
Thank you for asking that, and thank you for interrupting me. Please do continue to do that. So the Agency of Agriculture has a noxious weeds list, and that is generally historically been used as agricultural pests. Over time, it has kind of evolved into including other species that are plants, terrestrial and aquatic, and littoral species as well. So the Agency of Agriculture had an ad hoc committee and there was not a formal committee up until this past year. So that group was comprised of different divisions from the agency and the Agency of Agriculture and the Agency of Natural Resources. Last year, they did formalize that group, and that is the Vermont Invasive Plant Advisory Committee. And the Secretary Tebbets designated members from different agencies and also external partners to be advisors on that committee. And I'm on that committee as well. So they list, I'm sorry?
Is there anyone else from ANR on that committee?
Just the Agency of Agriculture. No, it's just me.
Okay, thank you.
So that's why, so those are noxious weeds, not particularly invasive, although invasive is included in that definition of what is noxious. So that's what is interesting about the definition for aquatic nuisance. As you can see here, it means an undesirable or excessive substance or population that interferes with the recreational potential or aquatic habitat of a body of water, including basically all plants, not necessarily invasive, but all aquatic plants and animals and algal populations. So this was to capture some of those aquatic plants that may not have been listed on the noxious weed list. And this also captures invasive animals that are not listed on the noxious weed list because it's a weed list.
Okay, so is this the formal, this is who decides what's an aquatic nuisance? Is through this Agency of Agriculture committee that has one member from DEC on it?
So the noxious weed list is just plants, and they decide what is an invasive or a noxious weed.
Okay. Statewide,
yeah.
That's the decider.
That's correct.
Thank you.
For aquatic nuisance means any aquatic plant, because it could be native or it could be invasive.
Yep, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. So does anybody have any other questions about the definitions? Hannah?
Kim, I just wanted to note the language of the current statute in 1451. It explicitly gives the Agency of Natural Resources additional authority to identify aquatic invasives. So it acknowledges that the formerly informal, now formal invasive plant advisory group exists to identify noxious weeds, but then clearly states that the Agency of Natural Resources' ability to identify aquatic nuisance species is separate and beyond that.
Thanks for that clarification, Hannah.
It says actually that it's necessary, but it's not granted in the findings. Is it granted somewhere else, Hannah?
Well, the agency's authority to then identify aquatic nuisance species, technically by rule, appears in the definitions. So in that definition of, sorry, I'm switching between screens here. Definition in 1452 of an aquatic nuisance, it states, it sort of provides this incomplete list and then any other species identified by the secretary, which is the Secretary of Natural Resources by rule.
Okay, thank you.
So because the way to get a noxious weed listed on the Agency of Agriculture's list, it takes years. And so this provides the Agency of Natural Resource the ability to react to any new introduction very quickly, if a new introduction does occur.
And I think one of the things that we've been asked to look at is how the determinations are made among the departments of the Agency of Natural Resources. So, for example, the aquatic nuisance definition, they could be in conflict. So recreational potential or aquatic habitat of a body of water, how does that get determined?
Well, we do have certain conditions in the permit that that note those different features and how those different features may interact with one another. So we can get to those when we review the permit conditions.
Okay.
So recreational potential is one parameter within the permit conditions. Aquatic habitat is another condition within the permit. So we kind of separate those things out a little bit.
Yeah, I guess what I'm wondering is if they're in competition, who's determining aquatic habitat or recreational potential as being the priority?
Through the internal procedures, we all are. We're all contributing to that factor.
Mm-hmm. And the internal procedures, those are the ones that were recently
Signed by all the different commissioners, yes.
okay.
Kim, it's Chris Bray, and I am remote and on a phone. Just wanted to double check and make sure you can hear me okay.
Yes, I can, Chris, and we're asking that the public not comment until the last 15 minutes of the meeting, please.
Okay,
But thanks for checking.
thanks. I'm gonna keep on
Chris is a
listening.
member of the committee.
Oh my goodness, Chris, I'm sorry. Yes, I didn't recognize you. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thanks, Amy. I wasn't quite sure what to make of your comment. Okay, now
Yes, I
it.
appreciate that. Thanks.
All set.
I didn't see that you were going to attend, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go back
Thanks,
to mute.
Henry. Okay. So does anybody have any other questions about the definitions? Okay, moving to the Aquatic Nuisance Control Program. So this shows the different requirements that the Agency of Natural Resource and through the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation is charged with. So we shall develop, establish, and maintain an aquatic nuisance control program. We don't specifically have an aquatic nuisance control program, but we do have the Aquatic Invasive Species Program, which I oversee. And then we just adopted and put under the Aquatic Invasive Species Program, the Aquatic Nuisance Control Permitting. So that's kind of making this program more whole than it was prior. So this program receives and responds aquatic nuisance complaints. We work with municipalities, local interest organizations, private individuals, and agencies of the state to develop long-range programs regarding aquatic nuisance controls. We work with federal, state, and local partners and governments to obtain funding. So we do receive federal grants, and we also provide local grants to municipalities and lake associations. We implement an aquatic species rapid response program. So as we get notification of new introductions, we respond to those immediately and attempt to first identify if it is indeed a new infestation or a new introduction. And then if it can be eradicated quickly, then we respond and attempt to eradicate it. We also administer the Aquatic Nuisance Control Grant and Aid Program. So we receive funds from the motorboat registration fees, and we provide those funds to municipalities for aquatic nuisance control. We also have approximately 300 signs throughout the state that identify either infected or infested water bodies or non-infested water bodies that there is a aquatic nuisance transport regulation in place. And so boats and trailers need to be cleaned, or there could be a penalty up to $1,000. Amy, do you have a question?
I do, but I'm waiting for you to finish.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we also work with the Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife and the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles with providing educational material. Go ahead.
I just needed to go back because you said that there were changes so that you didn't really have an aquatic nuisance control program. You have an invasive species program, but under that was nuisance control. And I guess I'm just curious how that lines up with statute.
Yeah, so historically, the Aquatic Invasive Species Program was the kind of the overseer and manager of aquatic invasive species in the state. And then we have permitting, which was in a different program within the lakes and program. So the Aquatic Nuisance Control Program is basically under the Lakes and Ponds program, but there was two separate divisions of responsibilities. And so now that Aquatic Nuisance Control Program is under the Aquatic Invasive Species Program. It's just how it's been historically divided. And that was kind of to separate the education and informational piece from the permitting piece, but now it is underneath the Aquatic Invasive Species Program, AKA the Aquatic Nuisance Control Program.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, is there any questions about the Aquatic Nuisance Control Program? So this component lists how the public or any person shall not transport an aquatic plant. And you'll notice it says an aquatic plant, so not necessarily an invasive species or a nuisance species, but any aquatic plant. So this sets up the inspection program. We also have the Vermont Public Access Greeter Program, so we provide funds for those programs, and those are placed at locations where lake associations and municipalities have the capacity to place a greeter at a boat access area. If there's not a boat access area at that location, the public is expected to check, clean, drain, and dry their boats. The wardens do help us with overseeing any violations for plants that are on boats or trailers. So that's how we work together with the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Division. There can be some exceptions to transport prohibition, so I do provide exemptions to people who may want to use plants for research or even through to eat and to collect. So there's some exceptions. And then we also talk about the signs and how they should be posted. Any questions about that? Okay, hearing none, I'll move to the next. So the 55 is the aquatic control permit, but I'm going to skip over that and come back to that because that is the second piece of the of this component here.
What do you mean of this component?
So I was going to go through all of the different components of the chapter 50.
Yeah.
And then come back to that because that's going to flow into our conversation about the report.
Oh, I think it would be helpful to go through the statute
One by one?
in summary now in order.
Okay, we can do that. Thank you. Okay, so this specifically is about the permit. So it outlines the conditions for the permit. So persons should not use pesticides, chemicals other than pesticides, biological controls, anything basically that's going to interrupt the waters of the state without a permit by the secretary. So I'm not going to read through these. I think that folks can read them. But I will make note of some of these conditions. So we shall issue a permit for the use of pesticides for the control of aquatic plants, insects, aquatic life, including lamprey. So lamprey wasn't called out as an aquatic nuisance. When the secretary finds there's no reasonable non-chemical alternative available, there's an acceptable risk to the non-target environment, there's negligible risk to public health, a long-range management plan has been developed and incorporates a schedule of pesticide minimization, and there's a public benefit to be achieved from the application. So it's unique for locations that are entirely on a landowner's property, so they are exempt. And those conditions are also followed through when issuing a permit. For G, when it's not a pesticide, those permits look a little bit different, so they don't have to there's two conditions that do not have to be met. So we talked a little bit about some conditions, how to work under the agency with the to protect recreation and habitat, and sometimes those are unique and can be either complementary or can negate one another. So we talk about those non-target impacts and the impacts of public health in the permit itself. Specifically, pesticides do not exceed 5 years for permit use, and non-chemical control is 10 years.
Does that mean an annual application for 5 years?
Well, they're allowed to apply every year, but they do have to meet conditions every year as well. So the permits are reviewed each year, and as long as the conditions are met and not changed from that original application, then they can apply each year up to 5 years. But again, there's a loop back, so they have to check in with with our division to make sure that they're following their plan.
And does someone go out on these application trips with them? Is there
The
someone-
Agency of Agriculture does. There's also pre and post tests, plant evaluation. So it's pre-herbicide for that first year, and then post plant surveys after herbicide treatments.
So the Agency of Agriculture has a staff person who goes out when these are being applied?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I also will say that the staff under the Aquatic Invasive Species Program, or I'm just going to say Aquatic Nuisance Control Program, we also do post-assessment as well when we're able.
You, the DEC does,
Yes.
what does post-assessment mean, entail?
So we will review and survey and monitor the effects of non-target species after herbicides are used.
I don't know who that is.
Olin, if you wouldn't mind checking to see who maybe have their.
They're muted now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and there's fees associated with this permit. Mosquito control activities are regulated under Agency of Agriculture. And the Agency of Agriculture also designates acceptable control products and methods. And we make general permits for the use of non-chemical aquatic nuisance control activities of this section. Those are generally for new infestations that we have to respond to quickly.
The general permit is for new infestations?
Mm-hmm.
And wow, so, and what kind of, if they're non-chemical, what kind of things does that include?
So that's usually either hand pulling or diver operated suction harvesting, benthic barriers.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, does anybody have any other questions about the permit statutes? Hearing none, I will go to the aquatic species rapid response general permit. So we just briefly touched on that. Excuse me. So when there is a new infestation, this provides a general permit for activities that could potentially eradicate that new infestation. So it's a little bit different. And this is basically for this agency to respond to new threats quickly. Does anyone have any questions about this? Okay. Hearing none, I will move to entrance upon lands. So we are able to enter public lands if we need to complete early detection, rapid response of any new aquatic species. We've never used this. So grant and aid to municipalities is what I mentioned before. So we do receive funds from the motorboat registration fees. When the statute was first comprised, we didn't have as many applicants. So we were able to provide a grant of up to 75% or less on anticipated project costs. And since that time, that has been reduced dramatically with more infestations and more applicants. So we provide around 20% of total project cost as awards for aquatic nuisance control projects and for those public access greeter projects. I did want to point out that the grant is available to municipalities and agencies of the state. So the general public cannot apply to this application. So this could be a parallel into interested parties for the permit. So just taking a note of that.
How many municipalities apply for this funding?
Well, we do have, fortunately, 3 regional partners who take on some of those municipalities. So approximately 50 different municipalities apply and through those regional partners as well.
Can you give me an example of a regional partner?
So our regional partner is the Poultney Meadowy Natural Resource Conservation District. And under that, her bigger grant, or the organization applies for, I think, 5 different municipalities under that umbrella.
Thank you.
That's to reduce administrative burden on the Department of Environmental Conservation. joint municipal participation. So this is if there's multiple municipalities that may want to participate in aquatic nuisance control project or shoreland waters, then they can work together. So we may adopt rules to implement the requirements of this chapter. And then the last one talks about those Vermont Public Access Greeter programs and the training that the Aquatic Nuisance Control Program also oversees the training of all those 300 plus individuals throughout the state. Okay, so do I have any questions about any of these statutes under the Chapter 50? Okay. So we can go back to the Aquatic Nuisance Control Permit statute if we want to kind of fine tune or ask questions specifically about any details of this, or we can jump into the report and the outline, which does actually go through some of the aquatic nuisance control permitting details. Just checking to see if anybody has any questions too. Hearing none. So then I will jump into the report.
Kim, as you get the report pulled up, I have a suggestion. In previous committees where we've had a report with a lot of sections with lots of different people, I know in our minutes, we've noted who's contributing to what sections. I've also found it helpful to put comments in the actual draft that says, Sarah, add text here, Kim, add text here, just so that when if Eric goes on to the draft report, he can control find and find his name where he's called out, and that can help people to easily see where they're expected to contribute.
Okay, great. So is that done through OneDrive or is that done through a Word document?
I think that the document we have is shared with everyone. I assume that all of us internal state folks can access it. I hope that the external folks can access it. So as long as that's true, then everybody should be able to see it there.
So the external members cannot, do not have access to it. So that's why I was going to pull up the outline first and go through the outline to make sure that we're all on the same page with the outline. And then I was now going to pull up the working document because there's a lot of detail in there.
Okay, thanks.
So I just had a logistics question. Is that why there's two documents?
Mm-hmm. So there's the working document, which is the draft that's in the OneDrive folder, and then there's the outline draft that is in the working folder as well. So because I have to share the information with the public, I thought it would be easier just to have the draft of the outline to get approval for that draft outline, and then I could put that up on the web page. And then, as the committee works through the working document, we can certainly make that available to the public in some way. I'm not sure, just through the meetings, I suppose. So yeah, I guess I'm a little bit, I'm trying to keep two separate systems going, one that's public facing and one that's not public facing.
Okay.
Sorry, Kim, did you say that there are two documents in the SharePoint site? I'm only asking because if I put text in and if I put it into the wrong document, I can take it out.
Nope. So if you go, why don't I just show you? And maybe everybody can open up the working documents that's in as a member, and you can see it for yourself as well, because that may reduce the confusion. So here's the working documents in our study committee OneDrive folder that the members have access to. So we have the draft that was approved of the agenda. We have the draft of the outline that is the public facing document and will be the public facing document. And then we have this working draft that includes your comments that you added this morning, Sarah.
Okay, thanks.
And so once this outline is approved by the committee, then I will upload this to the web page. Okay, so can we take a look at the outline draft then? And approve the draft. So that way I can place it on the Act 57 Study Committee webpage.
I have a question on the draft outline. I see on page 2 that there are words that are highlighted in yellow. What does that signify?
So those were points that were raised by the pre-rulemaking group and further explored by the pre-rulemaking group. So what we can do is, if you'd like to, I can go through the report draft and make, provide information about the different items. And
Well, I think
explains-
if we're talking about the outline to approve to put on the website, I would just take off the highlight since it's not immediately clear what that, why it's highlighted.
Okay,
Or maybe we should keep it and say why. I think, because there were other, I think it also relates to some of our charge, those words.
okay. Got the wrong one up here. Here's the correct one. Okay, so what is bolded in the outline is exactly from the Act 57 language. So I can note that. So the scope, I would include the study committee members and affiliations, an overview of the meeting minutes and discussions, an overview of Title 10, Chapter 50, basically what we just reviewed, an overview of the Aquatic Nuisance Control Permit, and then here's those highlighted items that Sarah, you discussed So I highlighted them again because that's what the pre-rulemaking group were reviewing at the time. So I just wanted to call those out. So some of those exceptions that are found in the permit, the different conditions, that is necessary for a permit to be issued. So this is just verbatim from the statute for the permit. And now we really get into the meat of the study committee report and the recommendations and what they should include. So anything that is bolded, again, is in the Act 57. And what is not bold is what I included based on our conversation last week. So the types of pesticides, chemicals other than pesticides, and biological control types, their descriptions, their specifications, and approved uses. Instead of non-chemical controls are just parenthesized because it's below. So these are the Pesticide Advisory Committee, which is now something the Agricultural Innovation Board provides the information of how pesticides are used in Vermont waters through the Agency of Agriculture. So I was going to provide an overview of that, what pesticides are used at this time and in the past 20 years, what chemicals have or have not been used, and then what biological controls. The only biological control that has been used in the state are weevils, and then I was also going to include others that may not be permitted because that question always comes up. Why aren't we using a fish, or why aren't we using some other biological control? So these are those non-chemical controls. So we're going to go into more of a description and specifications on how those are used and what the limiting factors are of those non-chemical controls. We're going to assess the use of pesticides. So I took out not all the other chemicals other than pesticides, biological controls out, because we're really only talking about pesticides from this point forward. So again, how those pesticides are assessed for a non-target environmental and non-target species. What, if any, requirements and gaps exist? The recommended legislative changes to implementing the permit in a more precautionary manner, if we find it to be so, and how it can be designed to better protect fish, reptiles, amphibians, and other aquatic biota. To establish the appropriate standard for the approval of the use of pesticides for aquatic nuisance control. So I was going to provide some historical context on those standards, point out that we have some standards in place now, and how the agricultural advice, the board now is oversees the pesticides in the state of Vermont. So I need to change that term. Sorry, I didn't change it already. And then these are, again, the highlighted terms that the pre-rulemaking group already identified, and we can review those, so that's why that is highlighted. And some proposed amendments for the ANC application. Again, if we find that we need to change those, so what is the public participation at the present? How the public comment period and how it takes place, and what concerns there are already for lengthening that process. So I also highlighted an opportunity for interested parties, because that was again a rulemaking, pre-rulemaking component that was highlighted by that group. And so I included that down here in B, suggestions and recommendations. So identifying who those interested parties may be and how they would interact with the process, whether it be a pre-permitting process or to find out other ways that other states have the interested parties comment on permits. And so a summary of those recommendations that we will have pointed out in the text above, and then other changes that the study committee determines are necessary or appropriate for the implementation of aquatic nuisance control in the state. So that could be, you know, increasing the funds to the program, or increasing staff, or increasing resources, anything that we might find. And then to include the public comments at the end. Okay. So do we have any questions about this outline or any additions that we'd like to make at this time?
I don't have any questions at this time, and looks like a great place to start from where I am.
Excellent, thank you.
It's Senator Bray. Same here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so do we need a vote? I don't believe so. Okay, so I will make some minor changes. I think the only change that I would like to make is perhaps taking out value side, because that's not really used. So I would just take that out, and then I would change, and instead of using the Pestary Advisory Committee, note that the new term for that former committee. So I'll make those minor changes.
Kim, are you sure that the Baylor hasn't been used with, it's used along with TFM, right? So that hasn't been a part of any of the applications since the 2000, maybe Eric knows.
Yeah, I can speak to that. It has been used in Vermont. It hasn't been used in the granular form on deltas for treating larvae there, but it is in some of the larger rivers, sometimes mixed in with TFM. It's commonly referred to as niclosamide, which is the active ingredient, and it's mixed in with TFM to make the TFM more effective at controlling sea lamprey at much lower concentrations, which is expected to have some benefits to other non-target species. So yes, it is used in Vermont on occasion.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. So I will keep it in. Okay, great. Well, thank you
Can I just
all. Oh, go ahead.
One more question on page 5, the bright blue highlighting. I think it's just important to say like what the yellow is, what the blue is, and even the bold, which is from
Yes.
statute, at the top of the document, maybe just say what those are.
Okay, great. Yes, great suggestion. Thank you.
What is the blue? Did you, sorry. If I
The
missed-
blue is just the terms, so I just wanted to call those out, and the action items that the pre-rulemaking group is working on.
Great, thanks.
Okay, any other questions or edits for me to make before I post this? Awesome. Okay, thank you very much. I'll stop sharing my screen. Try to get back at the agenda. We're actually ahead of time. That's great. So I will point out that the working draft is in the OneDrive folder, so everyone can comment and should have access to that working draft. So if for some reason you don't have access to it, please let me know.
Kim,
And-
how do we plan to share that? This is a logistical question. How do we plan to share it with the committee members who are not in state government? So UVM folks, the people who are going to be commenting. I mean, I love SharePoint because we can all be in there working at the same time and it captures all of our comments. So I hate to think we have to go back to our old ways of getting 20 separate versions with comments and someone spending those hours putting them all together. So I just wonder how that will work. I mean,
So I
can we
checked with
give them access? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I checked with IT and they said they do have access if I invite them directly.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's what they
Okay.
told me. I know that Ellen was having trouble getting into it, but I haven't heard that the UVM people cannot get into it.
Yeah, I was emailing with Bill Brest this morning. He did. I don't think early this morning he was able to get into it. I resent the link and didn't hear back yet. But yeah, we can follow up with them.
Yeah, yeah. I believe that we can make them the document available to them. If we need to work with IT, we can work with IT
Thank
to
you.
make that happen. Thank you. Okay, so is there any other questions about the report outline? Said it a few times. So shall we develop agenda items for the next meeting?
Well, maybe Kim, can we maybe go over our timeline again? That might help us remind us what we need to do before the next meeting, and that might help us with our agenda for the next meeting.
Oh, good point. Thank you.
And that next meeting is 1 week from today. Is this when we skip to 1 week? Okay.
I believe that's in the meeting minutes. Our timeline is in the meeting minutes. So by 7/10/17, which is yes, next week, incorporate information from topics noted above. So we need to start basically incorporating all the information from for the recommendations and for the report. So Sarah, you started plugging in some information on health impacts. My team and I also started filling in some of those folders with information. So you can look through the resources, the ANC Act 57 Study Committee resources, subtopics. So we included all the ANC permit examples in the subtopics. We have some pesticide use and non-target species information that we've been referring to. We have pesticides and how they've been used in Vermont, historical uses, and histories. So there's a lot of great information that is in the subfolders. I have reached out to other states to get some of their permit requirements and policies. I just received, I'm hoping to get Maine's and New York and potential Wisconsin's, who has more rigid permit conditions than ours. So once I receive those, I will place them in pesticide legislation standards app procedures. If there's something of note that the committee members would like me to research, please let me know and I can have my staff and I research anything that you would like.
So maybe our first agenda item next week is to, well, aside from minutes, et cetera, take a look at the sections and just note if we have any gaps at that point.
And maybe there'll be discussion.
Yeah. I also wonder if we should look respectively at some of those terms that were highlighted from the pre-rulemaking group.
Yeah.
So the terminology that was highlighted in the, that is highlighted in the draft outline that we've been talking about. So the terminology, sections and gaps and discussion. Sound good?
Yeah. What, can I ask clarification on the 12/12 timeline entry, which says comments incorporated by agency commissioners? What does that mean?
Let me look. Oh, probably just agency committee members. Thanks for catching that.
I think that I might have asked for some time. I mean, everything that I write goes
Oh.
up to my, up my chain and it does go through our commissioner's office, whether or not they feel the need to add comments, but it, so maybe it would be, we're trying to leave a couple weeks for that review to happen.
That's right. Thanks, Sarah, for reminding me. Yeah. So I believe the reports will need to go through our respective commissioners.
So it should say agency commissioner comments incorporated.
And I guess it's department commissioners, really. Agencies have secretaries.
Department, right?
Oh, that's true,
Let's
right?
hope it doesn't go to our secretaries, but.
Okay, so I'll change that in the meeting minutes.
Yeah, it's the next line down though.
Yeah, it's both.
It's both
Yeah,
Department.
department commissioners.
commissioners.
So that's a month.
I think it's a good goal.
So our draft report should be done by, yeah, a month. A month and 4 days.
So it seems like 10/17, we're hoping to have first draft. And I know on 10/31, we have a draft report developed, but if we're hoping to have some discussion, discussion might be facilitated by having some text in there to discuss. So is that our goal then to add in information to prompt discussion or?
Yeah, and I think we can perhaps take one issue on, or a few issues on, such as maybe non-target impacts or the terminology, and maybe the terminology might be the easiest one since it's next week. And we have some information from the pre-rulemaking group that we can incorporate into that information already. And so then the 1031 report, we can start looking at some other components that we identify. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay, so the agenda items therefore are for next meeting, to look at some of that terminology, and I can pull that back up if you want to look at what that terminology was. Not so easily found since I closed it. So for the public to see, since we're sharing things online and we're sharing things in the public, okay. So these terms, non-reasonable, acceptable, negligible, public benefit. Okay. If we get a chance, an opportunity, we can maybe skip ahead to public good, public benefit, interested parties as well. Does that make sense to the group?
Sure.
Okay, great. So, so then we'll go through and see the second item then will be to go through the draft and see where there's sections that have gaps. And then we'll work on those for the following week, 2 weeks next after that. And then we'll have a discussion. And then we will have public comments. And then end the meeting. So we have the agenda items noted, and I can create a draft agenda and put it up on the working documents. Actually, we're going to put those in the agenda folder rather than the working documents folder. The working documents folder will just be for the report itself. Okay. Any questions about the agenda for next week? Okay, should we open up the floor to the public then? The members okay with that? Yes, okay, thank you. All right, so thank you folks who were listening in, and I'm sure you had some questions about the study committee meeting and the report that we're all working on. So if anyone has any questions, now's your time to please raise your hand and we'll call on you. Okay, Pat, do you have a question for the group?
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Kim. I actually have a couple of comments I just want to put out there for the committee as you are moving forward and thinking about these issues. The first comment I'd like to remind the committee in terms of dealing with aquatic nuisance control issues is that a lot of this work is done by volunteer lake associations. And so in terms of particularly permitting for herbicides, I think it's important to keep that in mind in terms of the complexity that already exists in applying for a permit. And some of you have heard me present on this, and I'm always happy to do it again, but the steps and the complications of it. So while it's important to clarify and make sure we're doing the right thing and we're doing it in absolutely the most rigorous, we don't want to do the wrong thing, obviously. I think it's also important to remember that most of this work, the on the ground work, the hands-on work is being done by groups of volunteers. And with the help of Kim and other DEC staff and, their help and advice. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. If it becomes so complex, so difficult, and so time consuming and so expensive, some of this work may not happen. So I think, there has to be some recognition. And I will add, in terms of cost, most of the cost is borne by these associations. There is a small amount of funding through grants and through some of the state funds, but most of the money for this work is from the associations, and that means lots and lots of fundraising. And there is a limit to how much they can possibly raise. So I wanted to point that out, just to kind of keep that in mind as the discussion goes forward. I do think that the definitions of terminology, I'll be interested and probably have some comments and questions about that when you get to that, because I've certainly spent a number of years, as you know, Kim, working on that and trying to sort of figure out how do we do that? What does negligible and all those words mean? I think public good is a big one that's in front of us. So that's important. I'll just throw out one more comment in terms of interested parties. I think when you get to that, also keep in mind that our work from the association point of view, and as president of the Federation of Vermont Lakes and Ponds, we represent our volunteer lake associations in the state. Our work is to try to be as data-driven, evidence-based as possible. So when a lake association comes forward with a permit for use of herbicide, and there's only been a few of them, it's not widespread, only 11 lakes. I think it's important when interested parties become involved that also be based on evidence and data, so that we are not fighting through fog of misinformation that's just thrown out there, which is what's happened in many cases. Comments are made without evidence. So I guess figuring out how to bring interested parties in, but also to ensure that we're staying with the science and the evidence and the data, and not, whatever anybody feels like saying. So those are just some comments I want to just put out there, kind of put into the record to think about as you move forward. So thanks for the opportunity. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Pat. Is there another member of the public that would like to provide any comments to the study committee? Jody, I see you have your hands up.
Yeah, I think you can hear me now.
Yes.
All right. First of all, sorry for blowing my nose during the meeting earlier. I guess I want to comment on a couple of things, and a lot of that would probably be just right in the, the legislature. I think that it seems to me in a lot of cases the law is not really being followed. If you look at the like number 4, where it says there should be a long-range management plan with schedule of pesticide minimization, like Lake St. Catherine, best I can tell, has had herbicide used on it in 17 of the last 19 years. And I don't think it was used this year. And there's probably as much milfoil in the lake as I can recall. And I fished there on a Tuesday and Saturday. And so, like, I, generally speaking, I mean, I wouldn't describe myself as against milfoil, but it seems like there's been a lot of herbicide used in the lake and not a lot has come of it. And at least prior to the Lake Bombazine permit denial, I think a lot of the public would assume that the DEC would just very quickly re-up the permit to hit it again. And maybe the DEC is at a new point, and maybe that'll be the case, but I think that I'd love to get to a point where the public is sort of confident that if herbicide's gonna be used, it's used, one, very sparingly, and I guess two, sort of cautiously and not just on a continual cycle like we've seen at St. Catherine, like I think a lot of people were worried about at Lake Bombazine. One of the reasons there was so much opposition to herbicide use at Bomo, one, it's a really special lake, but two, just down the street we have a lake that has had herbicide used in it for a lot of the last 10 or 15 years. And it seems like the lake has not necessarily changed over that time. Like, it may have gotten worse in some ways, but if you look at it right now, there's still a lot of milfoil out there. I guess another thing I wanted to say is I don't think this is like any one person's fault necessarily. Like, I know I have been mad at the DEC before, and I know the DEC is the one generally stamping go on the permits, but it seems to me that it's underfunded, right? Like, it's not really anyone's job to manage our lakes, so local organizations have to do it. And if you have a half dozen people or 24 people who are really interested, then you can get a lot done. And the DEC doesn't have the ability to be on these lakes everywhere all the time. Fish and Game doesn't have the ability to survey everything all the time, to even, keep track of all the fish populations all the time. Like, I don't know if we're gonna solve the issue of not having funding, not having the people, but I'd love to end up at a place where it's a lot more cautiously used. And I definitely, like Pat said, I'll be really interested to see where these definitions land. I think, like, angler use of the fisheries is not, I don't think it's taken into account maybe as much as we'd like, but I think probably different stakeholders would say different things. But I'll be really curious about the definitions, and thanks for the work.
Thanks, Jody. Appreciate your comment. Are there other comments from the public? Now's your chance. Jeremy is noting in the comments section from Lake St. Catherine Association. He disagrees with the assessment he just heard of milfoil levels at Lake St. Catherine. Please see our aquatic plant management reports for Lake St. Catherine that shows milfoil is being controlled at Lake St. Catherine and the levels have been manageable. Okay, and now Jody is typing, probably a response to that. So while they type away, is there any other comments from the public or the members? Okay, so I think that we could probably end early if there's no other comments. and we can get working on this draft. So the members feel that it's appropriate to end early?
Yes.
Great. Do I need a motion? I'm sorry. Keep me updated on the motion. I don't believe we need a motion to end the meeting.
I think you can just call, having sort of warned the end of the meeting, and no one said they wanted to continue. You can just say, okay, the meeting's adjourned.
Okay, great. Thanks, Senator. All right. So hearing no objections to ending the meeting early, I will end the meeting early. Thank you all for participating. Please, committee members, get working on that draft. We will be putting information into the folders for you. Please let us know if you'd like us to research a particular topic, so we can get some of those publications in the folders for you. And I will also update the meeting minutes from last session and this session. And I will put the meeting minutes up on last week's meeting minutes up on the website, the draft agenda, and also provide that documentation in the working documents for the members to approve and update. Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate
Thank
you
you.
being here.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Right.